The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the penthouse terrace. Below us, the glittering lights of Manhattan stretched endlessly, but all I could focus on was the elderly man beside me, his weathered hand gently touching my waist as cameras flashed around us. "Smile, darling," he whispered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who owned half the city. "Let them see how happy we are." I forced my lips into a perfect curve, knowing that somewhere in the crowd below, his son, my ex-fiancé, was watching this moment unfold on every news channel in America. The irony was delicious. 3 months ago, I was the discarded woman, humiliated and broken. Tonight, I was about to become the stepmother of the man who destroyed my life. But let me start from the beginning. Because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about discovering that sometimes the cruelest betrayals lead us to exactly where we're meant to be. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning, everything changed like any other Tuesday in our Tribeca loft. I was standing in our pristine kitchen, steam rising from my coffee cup, watching Marcus Bennett adjust his silk tie in the reflection of our stainless steel refrigerator. Even after 3 years together, he still took my breath away. 6 feet of carefully sculpted perfection with those piercing blue eyes that had first caught my attention at a charity gala in the Hamptons. "Don't forget about dinner with my father tonight," he said, not bothering to look at me directly. His fingers worked efficiently at the Windsor knot, the same way he approached everything in his life. Calculated, precise, emotionally distant. "Of course not," I replied, though something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Should I wear the Valentino dress? The navy one he complimented last time?" Marcus finally turned, but his expression was unreadable. "Actually, Rachel, we need to talk about tonight. About us." The coffee cup grew heavy in my hands. In 3 years, Marcus had never started a conversation with those words unless someone was getting fired from his marketing firm. I set the cup down carefully, my interior design training having taught me that expensive things should never be handled carelessly. A lesson I was about to learn applied to relationships too. "What do you mean?" He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, his hands clasped behind his back in that CEO pose. I'd once found commanding. Now it just looked cold. "I've been thinking about our future, about what I really want from life." He paused, and I could see his reflection studying me in the glass. "You're an incredible woman, Rachel. Beautiful, intelligent, successful in your own right. Any man would be lucky to have you." The butt hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. "But," I whispered, "but I don't think we want the same things anymore. I'm 35, Rachel. I'm ready for the next phase of my life, and I need someone who can grow with me in that direction." I stared at his back, confusion mixing with the first tendrils of panic. "I don't understand. We've been talking about marriage, about starting a family." I thought that was the next phase. He turned then, and for the first time in months, his mask slipped enough for me to see something that looked almost like guilt. "Almost. You're 32, Rachel. You've built an amazing career. You have your own design firm, your own money, your own life. You don't need me the way I need someone to need me." "That doesn't make any sense," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Since when is independence a problem? You used to say you loved that about me." "I did. I do." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it for the first time in recent memory. "But I've met someone who makes me feel different. Alive in a way I haven't felt in years." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the marble countertop behind me, needing something solid to keep me upright. "You've met someone. Her name is Brittany. She's 24, and she sees the world with this incredible optimism and energy. When I'm with her, I feel like I can conquer anything. She makes me want to be the man I was always meant to be." 24. The number echoed in my head like a death knell. I was 32. Not old by any reasonable standard, but apparently ancient compared to Brittany's youthful exuberance. How long? I managed to ask. 2 months. 2 months. While I'd been planning our future, choosing engagement ring styles in secret, and dreaming about the family we'd build together, he'd been falling in love with someone young enough to be a college senior. Is she? I couldn't finish the question. But he understood. She's an intern at the firm. She started in January. Of course, she was. The cliché was so perfect it was almost funny. Except nothing about this felt remotely amusing. I thought about all the late nights he'd claimed to be working. All the business dinners I hadn't been invited to. All the times he'd come home smelling like unfamiliar perfume and blamed it on client meetings. I want you to know that I never meant for this to happen, he continued, his voice taking on that rehearsed quality he used during difficult presentations. But when you find the person you're meant to be with, you have to follow your heart, regardless of the timing. The person you're meant to be with, I repeated slowly. What does that make me, Marcus? What have I been for the past 3 years? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. You've been a learning experience. You helped me figure out what I really want from a partner. A learning experience. 3 years of my life, reduced to a fucking learning experience. I felt something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest, pushing down the hurt and humiliation. I see. And what exactly did you learn? That I want someone who looks at me like I hung the stars. Someone who gets excited about building a life together instead of just fitting me into the life she's already created. Someone who needs me as much as I need her. Someone younger, I said flatly. Someone less established. Someone I can shape a future with instead of negotiating every decision. The mask was fully off now, and I could see him clearly for the first time in years. Marcus Bennett didn't want a partner. He wanted a beautiful accessory who would worship him and never challenge his ego. He wanted someone grateful enough for his attention to never question his choices or demand equal footing in the relationship. I'd been too successful, too independent, too much of a real person for his taste. When are you telling your father? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even disappointment that I wasn't begging or crying. Tonight, actually. That's why I wanted to talk to you first. Brittany will be joining us for dinner. The audacity was breathtaking. He was going to parade his child bride in front of me at what was supposed to be our regular family dinner with his father. How thoughtful of you, I said. My tone so sweet it could have cut glass. I'm sure she'll make quite an impression. Marcus frowned, clearly expecting a different reaction. Rachel, I hope we can be mature about this. We run in the same social circles. We'll inevitably see each other around town. I'd prefer if we could remain civil. Civil. He wanted me to be civil while he flaunted his midlife crisis in front of Manhattan's elite social scene. Of course, I said, moving toward the bedroom we'd shared for 2 years. I'll just pack a few things and get out of your way. You don't have to leave immediately, he called after me. Take your time finding a new place. I'm not heartless. I paused in the doorway, looking back at this man I'd thought I knew. No, Marcus, you're not heartless. You're just weak. For the first time that morning, he looked genuinely stung. I packed quickly and efficiently, years of business travel having taught me to prioritize ruthlessly. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents, and the jewelry I'd bought for myself. I left behind everything he'd given me. I wanted nothing that would remind me of how completely I'd misjudged this situation. As I wheeled my suitcase toward the door, Marcus appeared in the hallway. Rachel, wait. I know this is hard, but someday you'll understand. Someday you'll find someone who appreciates everything you have to offer. I stopped, my hand on the door handle, and turned to give him one last look. You're right, Marcus. I will find someone who appreciates me. And when I do, I promise you'll be the first to know. The confusion in his eyes was almost satisfying. He had no idea what I meant, no concept that I might be anything other than devastated by his decision. That was his first mistake. I walked out of our apartment and into the crisp October air, pulling out my phone as the door closed behind me. I had calls to make, plans to set in motion. If Marcus Bennett wanted to play games with people's hearts, he was about to learn that he'd chosen the wrong opponent. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My first call was to my assistant, canceling all my appointments for the week. My second was to my best friend Diana, arranging to stay in her guest room until I figured out my next move. My third call was to a private investigator I'd used for background checks on potential business partners. Carmen, it's Rachel Hayes. I need you to compile a complete dossier on someone. Everything you can find: financial records, personal history, family connections, weaknesses. Yes, it's personal this time. The name is Marcus Bennett, and I needed it yesterday. As I climbed into the taxi that would take me away from the life I'd thought I wanted, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of a new challenge. Marcus thought he knew me, thought he could predict my reaction and plan accordingly. He had no idea that the woman he'd just discarded was about to become his worst nightmare. But first, I needed to understand my enemy. And that meant learning everything there was to know about the Bennett family, starting with Marcus's estranged father, the billionaire real estate mogul who controlled half of Manhattan's most valuable properties. William Bennett was a man who appreciated beautiful, intelligent women and had no patience for weakness or disloyalty. From what I'd observed during our few interactions, he also had very specific opinions about his son's choices in life. I smiled as the taxi pulled into traffic, already formulating the beginning of a plan that would make Marcus's betrayal look like a minor inconvenience. He wanted to trade me in for a younger model. Fine. I'd trade him in for a richer one. The game was just beginning. Diana's penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side had always been my sanctuary, but tonight it felt like a war room. Spread across her glass dining table were printouts, photographs, and documents that painted a comprehensive picture of the Bennett family empire. Carmen had delivered exactly what I'd asked for, and the information was more valuable than I'd dared hope. Jesus Christ. Rachel, Diana said, setting down a glass of wine and studying the papers over my shoulder. This is some serious espionage-level shit. Are you planning to destroy the man or marry into his family? Why not both? I replied, not looking up from the financial reports. Diana had been my roommate at Columbia and remained my closest friend through every triumph and disaster of the past decade. If anyone could help me navigate this particular minefield, it was her. You know I love a good revenge plot, she said, settling into the chair across from me. But William Bennett isn't some random rich guy you can manipulate with a pretty smile. He's a predator who's been playing these games since before you were born. I finally looked up, meeting her concerned gaze. Then it's a good thing I'm not some random pretty girl trying to gold dig her way to the top. I have my own money, my own reputation, and my own reasons for wanting to get close to him. The dossier on William Bennett read like a modern Machiavelli biography. 71 years old, worth an estimated $2.8 billion, with real estate holdings spanning from Manhattan to Miami. He'd built his empire through a combination of ruthless business acumen and an uncanny ability to identify undervalued properties before anyone else noticed their potential. More interesting than his professional success was his personal history. 3 marriages, each ending in expensive but quietly handled divorces. No public scandals, no messy court battles, just substantial settlements and ironclad NDAs that kept his ex-wives from sharing details about their time as Mrs. Bennett. The relationship with his son Marcus was notably strained. According to Carmen's sources, William had expected Marcus to join the family business after college, but Marcus had rebelled by starting his own marketing firm with money from a trust fund. The two men barely spoke except at obligatory family functions, and William had reportedly been heard calling his son a disappointment, who prefers playing with pretty pictures to building empires. That tension was exactly what I planned to exploit. Look at this, I said, sliding a photograph across the table. It showed William at a charity gala from last month, his arm around a stunning brunette, who looked to be in her early 40s. That's his current girlfriend, Vivian Torres. Investment banker. Divorced. No kids. They've been together for 8 months. Diana studied the photo. She's gorgeous. What's your point? My point is that William Bennett has a very specific type. Look at the photos of his ex-wives. All brunettes. All accomplished in their own fields. All between 35 and 45 when they married him. He doesn't want arm candy. He wants a sophisticated woman who can hold her own in his world. Rachel, you're 32 with auburn hair and you're single as of this morning. You literally do not fit his pattern at all. I smiled, pulling out my phone and scrolling to a photo I'd taken at my hair salon last year, when I'd briefly considered going darker. With rich chocolate brown hair and the right styling, I could absolutely fit William Bennett's preferred aesthetic. Hair color is temporary, I said, and 32 is close enough to 35. Besides, I have something none of his previous women had. What's that? A personal connection to his son and insider knowledge of exactly how much Marcus disappoints him. Diana drained her wine glass and shook her head. This is insane. You're talking about seducing a billionaire to get revenge on his son. Do you hear yourself right now? I'm talking about making strategic moves to reclaim my power after being discarded like yesterday's newspaper. I corrected. William Bennett is a means to an end. Diana. The end being Marcus learning that actions have consequences. What I didn't tell Diana was that the more I read about William Bennett, the more genuinely intrigued I became. Unlike his son, William had built something substantial from nothing. He'd grown up poor in Queens, worked construction jobs to pay for night school, and slowly accumulated properties when everyone else thought Manhattan real estate was worthless in the 70s. He was self-made in a way that Marcus, with his trust fund and inherited connections, would never be. There was something appealing about a man who understood the value of hard work and didn't take success for granted. Okay, fine, Diana said, refilling both our glasses. Let's say I'm willing to help you with this insane plan. What's step 1? I pulled out another set of documents, event listings, and social calendars for the next 2 weeks. Step 1 is positioning myself in William's orbit. He has a very predictable social routine. Tomorrow night is the Metropolitan Museum's autumn benefit, which I was supposed to attend with Marcus anyway. William will be there, and according to these society pages, he never misses an opportunity to network at cultural events. And you think you can just walk up to him and introduce yourself as his son's ex-girlfriend? Of course not. I think I can engineer a seemingly coincidental meeting that allows me to demonstrate my value as a potential ally rather than just another woman throwing herself at him. I spread out the museum's floor plan and pointed to the Renaissance wing. William Bennett is a major donor to the museum's acquisition fund. He has a particular interest in Italian Renaissance art, specifically works by artists who were undervalued in their time, but are now considered masters. There's a new Caravaggio on display that the museum acquired largely thanks to his funding. How do you know all this? Carmen's report includes his donation history and philanthropic interests. The man may be ruthless in business, but he's passionate about art history. It's one of the few areas where he allows emotion to influence his decisions. Diana looked impressed, despite herself. So you're going to accidentally bump into him while admiring his favorite painting? I'm going to be there first, clearly knowledgeable about the piece, and completely uninterested in his wealth or status. I'll discuss the artistic techniques and historical significance, like the art history minor I actually am, not like some social climber trying to impress him. And then what? Then I let him make the first move. Men like William Bennett are predators. They enjoy the chase more than the capture. If I seem too eager or available, he'll lose interest immediately. But if I present a challenge, something to be pursued and won, I shrug. Well, according to his dating history, that's exactly what appeals to him. Diana was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. You know this could backfire spectacularly, right? If William finds out you're doing this to hurt Marcus, he might destroy you just for fun. Or he might respect the strategy. I countered. Everything I've read about him suggests he admires intelligent ruthlessness. He didn't build an empire by being sentimental about family loyalty. The next morning, I started executing my plan with military precision. First stop was the salon, where I sat for 4 hours transforming my auburn waves into sleek chocolate-brown locks that made my green eyes pop dramatically. The colorist added subtle highlights that caught the light perfectly, creating depth and richness that photographed beautifully. Next was shopping for the perfect dress. Something sophisticated enough for a museum benefit, but distinctive enough to be memorable. I found it at Bergdorf's, a midnight blue silk gown with subtle beading that caught the light when I moved. It was elegant without being flashy, expensive without being obvious about it. I spent the afternoon researching Caravaggio's Judith beheading Holofernes, the painting that had recently joined the Met's collection thanks to William's donation. I studied the brushwork, the historical context, the symbolic elements that made it a masterpiece of chiaroscuro technique. By evening, I could discuss the piece with the confidence of someone who genuinely appreciated its artistic merit. The Metropolitan Museum's autumn benefit was exactly the kind of event I'd attended dozens of times with Marcus, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and cultural appreciation, where Manhattan's elite could network while pretending to care about art. I arrived fashionably late, signed in under my own name, and made my way directly to the Renaissance wing. The Caravaggio was displayed in a place of honor, dramatically lit to emphasize the painting's signature use of light and shadow. I positioned myself in front of it with a glass of champagne, genuinely absorbed in studying the details I'd spent the day learning about. Most people focus on the violence of the scene, a deep voice said behind me. They miss the incredible technical skill required to create that sense of movement with static paint. I turned slowly, as if reluctant to be interrupted in my contemplation, and found myself looking directly into the sharp gray eyes of William Bennett. He was exactly as imposing in person as in his photographs, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. "The brushwork on Judith's hands is extraordinary," I replied, not betraying any recognition of who he was. Caravaggio managed to convey both determination and revulsion in the way her fingers gripped the sword. "It's simultaneously beautiful and horrifying." William stepped closer, studying both me and the painting with equal intensity. "You know your art history. I know what I like," I said with a slight smile, "and I appreciate craftsmanship, whether it's 400 years old or contemporary. Are you in the art world professionally?" "Interior design, actually." Rachel Hayes. I extended my hand, noting the slight flicker of recognition that crossed his features. He'd heard my name before, probably from Marcus. "William Bennett," he replied, taking my hand in a firm grip that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "I believe we may have a mutual acquaintance." "It's possible," I said neutrally, neither confirming nor denying the connection. Manhattan's social circles tend to overlap in interesting ways. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking at the painting. I could feel him evaluating me, trying to determine my angle and my intentions. It was exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. "Tell me," he said finally, "what draws you to Caravaggio specifically?" Most people find his work too dark, too violent for their taste. I considered the question seriously before answering. I think he understood something about human nature that most artists shy away from. He painted people in their moments of greatest moral complexity, not purely good or evil, but caught between competing desires and obligations. There's something honest about that ambiguity. William's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a remarkably sophisticated observation." "I'm a remarkably sophisticated woman," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Though I suspect you've already figured that out." For the first time since we'd started talking, he smiled, not the polite social smile he'd been wearing, but something genuine and appreciative. "Would you like to see the rest of the exhibition?" he asked. "I understand there are some interesting new acquisitions in the modern wing." "I'd love to," I said, setting my empty champagne glass on a nearby table. "Lead the way." We spent the next hour moving through the museum's galleries, discussing everything from Byzantine mosaics to contemporary installations. William was incredibly knowledgeable and surprisingly passionate about art history, far removed from the cold businessman I'd expected to encounter. More importantly, I could see him becoming genuinely interested in me as a person rather than just another woman in his orbit. When I disagreed with his interpretation of a particular piece, he listened thoughtfully instead of dismissing my opinion. When I made a joke about a particularly pretentious installation, he laughed with genuine amusement. By the time we'd made our way back to the main reception area, I knew I had successfully completed phase 1 of my plan. William Bennett was intrigued, and more importantly, he saw me as an intellectual equal rather than a potential trophy. "I have to say," he said, as we paused near the museum's grand staircase, "this has been the most enjoyable evening I've had at one of these events in years. Most people here seem more interested in being seen than actually seeing anything." "Well, I'm not most people," I replied with a smile that held just a hint of mystery. "No," he agreed, studying my face with those penetrating gray eyes. "You're definitely not." The moment stretched between us, charged with possibility and unspoken understanding. I could sense him weighing his next move, deciding whether to pursue this unexpected connection. "Rachel," he said finally, "would you be interested in continuing this conversation over dinner sometime? I know a place with exceptional wine and absolutely no socialites discussing their latest charity projects." "That sounds perfect," I said, pulling a business card from my purse and handing it to him. "I look forward to hearing from you." As I walked away, I could feel his eyes following my progress across the room. Phase 1 was complete, and more successfully than I'd dared hope. I was halfway to the exit when I spotted Marcus across the crowded reception hall, his arm wrapped possessively around a petite blonde who could only be Brittany. She was everything I'd expected: young, bubbly, and gazing at Marcus with the kind of unquestioning adoration he'd craved. Marcus saw me at the same moment, his face going pale as he took in my transformed appearance and confident demeanor. I smiled and gave him a small wave, as if encountering him was the most natural thing in the world. Then I turned and walked out into the night, already planning my next move in the game I'd just begun. In my purse, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Thank you for a remarkable evening. Dinner tomorrow at Daniel, 8 p.m. William," I typed back quickly. "See you there." The hunt had officially begun. Daniel was exactly the kind of restaurant where Manhattan's power brokers made deals over 30-year-old scotch and truffle-infused everything. Dimly lit, discreetly elegant, with tables spaced far enough apart that conversations couldn't be overheard by curious ears. I arrived precisely on time, wearing a charcoal gray dress that walked the perfect line between professional and alluring. William was already seated at a corner table, studying the wine list with the intensity of a general planning a campaign. When he looked up and saw me approaching, something flickered in his eyes: appreciation, perhaps, or calculation. With a man like William Bennett, the two were probably indistinguishable. "You look stunning," he said, rising to pull out my chair. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and somehow more seductive than any modern casual approach would have been. "Thank you," I replied, settling into my seat and accepting the glass of wine he poured from an already open bottle of Bordeaux. "This is beautiful." 19. His eyebrows rose slightly. 1985, actually. But close. Most people can't distinguish between good wine and great wine, let alone identify specific vintages. "I spent a summer in Bordeaux during college," I explained, taking a careful sip. "My host family owned a small vineyard. I learned that wine, like art, tells a story about the time and place it was created. And what story does this one tell?" I closed my eyes briefly, letting the wine roll across my palate before swallowing. Patience. This vintage waited decades to reach its full potential. It's complex, layered, with depths that only reveal themselves to those willing to take the time to really understand it. When I opened my eyes, William was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's a remarkably apt metaphor for many things in life. The waiter appeared to take our orders, and I was careful to choose something that wouldn't be messy to eat: pan-seared salmon with a delicate sauce that wouldn't splatter. William ordered the lamb, bloody, which told me everything I needed to know about his approach to both food and life. "So," he said after the waiter departed, "tell me about your business." Interior design seems like a field that requires both artistic vision and practical problem-solving skills. I smiled, recognizing the interview technique. He was probing to understand my capabilities, my drive, my potential value as either an ally or a threat. It's about understanding what people need versus what they think they want, I said. Clients come to me with Pinterest boards full of trends and magazine clippings, but my job is to look deeper. What are their actual living patterns? How do they entertain? What makes them feel secure and comfortable? Then I create spaces that serve their real needs while exceeding their aesthetic expectations. Give me an example. I thought for a moment, choosing a client story that would illustrate my point without revealing confidential details. Last year, I worked with a hedge fund manager who wanted a minimalist penthouse. All white surfaces, clean lines, nothing unnecessary. Very sterile and impressive. But he had a 5-year-old daughter who visited every other weekend, and he was clearly struggling with how to make her feel welcome in this museum-like space he'd envisioned. So I designed hidden storage throughout the apartment, built-in toy boxes that looked like modern sculptures, art panels that opened to reveal coloring supplies, even a reading nook disguised as an architectural feature. William leaned forward slightly, genuinely interested. How did he react? At first, he was skeptical. It wasn't the cold, impressive space he'd requested, but 6 months later he called to tell me his daughter had asked if she could live with him full-time because his apartment felt like home instead of a hotel. You gave him something more valuable than what he'd asked for. Exactly. I solved the problem he didn't know he had. Our food arrived, and we ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. I could feel William evaluating everything: my table manners, my conversation skills, my ability to be comfortable in this rarefied environment without being overwhelmed by it. "What about you?" I asked, cutting into my salmon. "How did you know real estate was your calling?" His laugh was dry, almost bitter. "I didn't choose real estate so much as it chose me. When you grow up poor in Queens, you learn quickly that the people who own the buildings have all the power. I decided early on that I'd rather be the landlord than the tenant." That must have been quite a transition, going from construction worker to property mogul. He paused with his fork halfway to his mouth, studying my face. "You've done your research." I met his gaze without flinching. "I always research people I'm interested in. It's a habit that served me well in business and in life." "And what did your research tell you about me?" This was dangerous territory. Too much knowledge would reveal my intentions. Too little would make me seem naive. "That you're a man who builds things that last," I said carefully. "Your properties aren't just investments, they're part of Manhattan's permanent landscape. You think in decades, not quarters." "What else?" "That you value competence over charm, substance over style, that you don't suffer fools, and you don't make the same mistake twice." "And you think those are admirable qualities?" "I think they're rare qualities. Most people in your position got there through inheritance or luck. You earned your success through intelligence and determination." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that I'd identified the specific source of his pride. "You'd be amazed how many people assume I inherited my wealth," he said. "They see the suits and the penthouse and the art collection, and they assume I was born into privilege." "People see what they expect to see," I replied. "It's easier than looking deeper. And you prefer to look deeper. Always." The conversation flowed naturally from there, touching on everything from architecture to politics to the changing face of Manhattan's neighborhoods. William was incredibly well-informed and surprisingly willing to tear his opinions on subjects that most wealthy men would consider too controversial for a first date. I found myself genuinely enjoying his company, which complicated my original plan in ways I hadn't anticipated. He was sharp, funny in a dry way, and clearly passionate about his work beyond just the financial rewards. When he talked about revitalizing abandoned buildings or preserving historic facades, his whole demeanor changed. He became less calculating businessman and more visionary artist. "You know," he said as we shared a dessert of dark chocolate tart, I expected this evening to be pleasant but predictable. You've surprised me. How so? Most women who accept dinner invitations from men my age are either gold diggers looking for a wealthy husband or social climbers wanting access to exclusive circles. You seem genuinely uninterested in either. I laughed, hoping it sounded natural rather than practiced. Maybe I'm just here for the excellent wine and stimulating conversation. Maybe, he agreed, but his tone suggested he suspected there were deeper motivations at play. Or maybe you're more complex than you appear on the surface. Aren't we all? As the evening wound down, William walked me to the restaurant's entrance, where his driver was waiting with a sleek black Mercedes. "Can I give you a ride home?" he asked. "Thank you, but I'll take a taxi," I replied. I prefer to maintain my independence, especially early in whatever this is. He smiled at that, the first completely unguarded expression I'd seen from him all evening. I respect that. In fact, I insist on it. He handed me a business card with his personal cell phone number handwritten on the back. "I'd like to see you again, Rachel. Soon." "I'd like that too," I said, meaning it more than I'd expected to. As his car pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, processing what had just happened. The evening had gone exactly according to plan. William was clearly interested. I'd established myself as his intellectual equal, and I'd left him wanting more. But I hadn't expected to find him genuinely appealing as a person. That was a complication I'd need to manage carefully. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "How did it go? Are you officially a gold digger now?" I typed back, "Phase 2 complete." He's taking the bait. What I didn't text was the growing realization that the bait might be working both ways. The next morning brought an unexpected development. I was reviewing fabric samples in my office when my assistant knocked on the door. "Rachel, there's a delivery for you." She handed me an elegant white box tied with black ribbon. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a first-edition copy of a biography of Caravaggio, along with a handwritten note, "For someone who appreciates the complexity of masterpieces." The book was clearly expensive and obviously chosen with care. It wasn't the flashy gesture of flowers or jewelry that most men would have sent. It was personal, thoughtful, and perfectly calibrated to appeal to my interests. I was still holding the book when my phone rang. William's name appeared on the caller ID. "Did you get my gift?" he asked without preamble. "It's beautiful," I said, running my fingers along the leather binding. "And completely unexpected. I thought you might appreciate having something substantial to remember our conversation by." "Thank you. It's perfect." "Good. Now I have a proposition for you." I felt my pulse quicken. "What kind of proposition?" "I'm flying to Miami this weekend to look at a property I'm considering acquiring. It's a historic Art Deco hotel that's been badly mismanaged for years. I think it has potential, but I'd value a second opinion from someone with your eye for design and spatial relationships." "You want me to evaluate a property with you?" "I want you to spend the weekend with me," he said bluntly. "The property evaluation is just an excuse that lets us both pretend this is business rather than pleasure." The directness was both alarming and attractive. William Bennett didn't waste time with games or pretense. When he wanted something, he went after it with single-minded focus. "That's quite an offer," I said carefully, "but I barely know you, which is exactly why I'm suggesting we spend more time together. Private jet, 5-star accommodations, and the chance to see me in my natural habitat making million-dollar decisions. What could be more illuminating?" I could think of several answers to that question, but none that I could voice. "I'll need to check my schedule," I said, buying time to think. "Of course, but Rachel." "Yes?" "Don't overthink this. Sometimes the most interesting opportunities come from saying yes to the unexpected." After he hung up, I sat in my office chair, staring at the Caravaggio biography and trying to process what had just happened. William Bennett, billionaire, predator, target of my revenge scheme, had just invited me to spend a weekend with him in Miami. It was exactly the kind of rapid escalation I'd hoped for, but it was happening faster than I'd anticipated. If I said yes, I'd be crossing a line from which there might be no return. If I said no, I'd lose the momentum I'd worked so hard to build. My phone buzzed with another text. This one from an unknown number. Saw you at Daniel last night with an interesting dinner companion. Didn't realize you moved on so quickly. Marcus. He was having me watch, or more likely, he'd heard about my dinner with his father through Manhattan's gossip network. Either way, the message was clear. He was paying attention to my movements and didn't appreciate what he was seeing. Perfect. Let him worry about what I was planning. Let him wonder whether I'd told his father about our relationship or about the circumstances of our breakup. Let him stew in uncertainty while I played a game he couldn't even see, let alone win. I picked up my phone and dialed William's number. "I've checked my schedule," I said, when he answered. "Miami sounds fascinating." "Excellent. We leave Friday afternoon. I'll send you the details." "William?" "Yes? I hope you know what you're getting yourself into." His laugh was low and appreciative. "My dear Rachel, I could say the same thing to you." As I hung up the phone, I realized that truer words had never been spoken. The game was accelerating beyond my original parameters, and I was no longer entirely sure who was hunting whom. But that just made it more interesting. I opened the Caravaggio biography to a random page and found myself looking at a reproduction of Judith beheading Holofernes, the same painting where William and I had first met. In the margin, someone had written a note in elegant handwriting. "Sometimes the most beautiful acts are also the most ruthless." I had no idea if the note was William's or if it had been there when he bought the book. But either way, the message was unmistakable. The weekend in Miami would determine whether I was Judith of Holofernes in this particular masterpiece of revenge. I was betting I had the stronger hands. William's private jet was a study in understated luxury, cream leather seats, polished wood accents, and a fully stocked bar that probably cost more than most people's cars. I settled into the seat across from him, accepting a glass of champagne as Manhattan disappeared beneath us through the oval windows. "First time on a private jet?" he asked, studying my reaction with those penetrating gray eyes. "Second," I replied truthfully. "I did a design project for a tech mogul last year who flew me to his Napa estate. But nothing quite this elegant. I believe in traveling comfortably. Life's too short to waste time in airport security lines and cramped commercial seats." As we flew south, William spread architectural plans and financial reports across the table between us. The property in question was the Oceana Hotel, a 1940s Art Deco masterpiece that had been slowly deteriorating under absentee ownership for the past decade. "Look at these bones," he said, pointing to the original blueprints. "The lobby soars 3 stories with hand-painted murals. The ballroom has terrazzo floors in geometric patterns, and every room has ocean views through floor-to-ceiling windows. It's a crime what they've done to this place." I leaned forward to study the plans, genuinely interested despite my ulterior motives. The Oceana had clearly been spectacular in its heyday, the kind of place where movie stars and politicians had conducted affairs and made deals that changed the world. "What's the seller asking?" $42 million. "It's overpriced for the current condition, but undervalued for the potential." He pulled out photographs showing peeling paint, water damage, and outdated furnishings that looked like they hadn't been changed since the Reagan administration. "I'm thinking $28 million is more realistic. And renovation costs? Another 15 to 20, depending on how authentic we want to be, versus how practical." "That's where your expertise comes in." The casual way he said, "we" sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the airplane's air conditioning. William Bennett was already thinking of this as a joint venture, a shared vision that would bind us together professionally as well as personally. "What's your timeline?" I asked, forcing myself to focus on the business aspects. "Fast. There are 2 other serious buyers circling, including a developer who wants to tear it down and build condos. I want to close within 60 days if I decide to move forward." "That's aggressive." I don't believe in hesitation when I see something I want. The way he said it, looking directly at me rather than the building plans, made it clear he wasn't just talking about real estate. We landed in Miami as the sun was setting. painting the sky in shades of coral and gold that would have made any interior designer weep with envy. William's driver met us at the private aviation terminal, with another black Mercedes, and we were whisked through the city's glittering downtown towards South Beach. The Oceana Hotel sat on a prime stretch of oceanfront property, its Art Deco facade still magnificent despite obvious neglect. Even in the fading light, I could see the elegant curves of the building's silhouette, the stylized palm fronds carved into the stone entrance, the nautical details that spoke of an era when travel was glamorous and architecture told stories. God, it's beautiful, I breathed, stepping out of the car and craning my neck to take in the full scope of the building. Wait until you see the interior, William said, his hand settling on the small of my back as he guided me toward the entrance. The casual intimacy of the gesture sent heat racing through my body, and I had to remind myself that this was supposed to be business. The current hotel manager met us in the lobby, a nervous man in his 50s who clearly knew his property was being evaluated for purchase. As he led us through the public spaces, I found myself genuinely impressed by what William had seen in this place. The lobby was indeed spectacular, with a soaring ceiling painted in a mural depicting stylized ocean waves and tropical birds. The terrazzo floors were chipped and stained, but still showed hints of their original geometric brilliance. Art Deco light fixtures hung like frozen waterfalls, their glass panels cloudy with age but structurally sound. "The bones are incredible," I murmured to William, as we examined the ballroom. "You could restore this to its original glory, and still add modern amenities without compromising the architectural integrity." "Show me," he said, handing me a tablet loaded with architectural software. "Walk me through your vision." For the next hour, I lost myself in the creative process, sketching overlays on the existing floor plans and describing how I would approach the restoration. I talked about sourcing period-appropriate fixtures, recreating the original color schemes using modern paint technologies, and hiding contemporary conveniences within the Art Deco framework. William listened intently, asking smart questions and offering insights that proved he understood both the aesthetic and practical challenges involved. When I suggested using hidden LED strips to highlight the lobby's architectural details, he immediately grasped how that would create drama while preserving the historical authenticity. "You see it," he said with satisfaction as we finished touring the penthouse suite. "You understand what this place could become." "It's not hard when you're working with such extraordinary source material," I replied, running my hand along a curved balcony railing that overlooked the moonlit ocean. "Places like this don't exist anymore. Everything is glass boxes and manufactured luxury. This has soul." "Exactly." He moved to stand beside me at the railing, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that probably cost more per ounce than most people spent on groceries. "That's what I've been trying to explain to my son for years. Real value isn't just about profit margins and quarterly returns. Sometimes you invest in something because it deserves to exist." The mention of Marcus jarred me back to reality. For the past several hours, I'd been so absorbed in the property and in William's company that I'd almost forgotten my original purpose for being here. "You and Marcus don't see eye to eye on business philosophy?" I asked carefully. William's expression hardened slightly. "Marcus sees buildings as commodities to be leveraged and flipped. He has no appreciation for craftsmanship or legacy. Everything is about the fastest path to maximum profit." "That must be frustrating." "It's disappointing," he corrected. "I built this empire, hoping to pass it on to someone who would understand its value beyond the balance sheet. Instead, I raised a son who thinks success is measured entirely in dollars." I sensed an opportunity to probe deeper. Maybe he just needs time to develop that appreciation. "Not everyone is born with your vision." "Marcus is 35 years old," William said flatly. "If he hasn't developed vision by now, he never will. He's more interested in playing with his marketing toys and chasing women half his age than building anything meaningful." The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, and I filed away every word for future use. William's disappointment in his son ran deeper than I'd realized, which made my presence here even more psychologically loaded than I'd planned. Enough about family disappointments, he said, turning away from the railing. Let's go get dinner. I want to show you the kind of restaurant this hotel could support if it were properly restored. We dined at a small, exclusive place in the design district, where William was clearly a valued customer. The chef personally brought out dishes that weren't on the menu, and the sommelier recommended wines that pair perfectly with both the food and the warm Miami evening. Tell me about your family, William said over the main course. Are you close to your parents? I navigated the question carefully, sharing just enough truth to seem genuine without revealing anything that could be used against me later. I talked about my mother's career as a high school principal, my father's work as an engineer, their solid middle-class values and emphasis on education and hard work. They must be proud of your success, he observed. They are. But they also worry that I work too much and don't make enough time for personal relationships. Are they right to worry? I met his gaze directly. Until recently, probably yes. I've always been better at building beautiful spaces than building lasting connections with people. And recently I've started to think that maybe the right person could change that pattern. The conversation grew more intimate as the evening progressed. William shared stories about his early struggles in business, the deals that had made his fortune, the mistakes that had taught him valuable lessons. I found myself genuinely enjoying his company, appreciating his intelligence and dry humor. When he told me about his failed marriages, I sensed pain beneath his matter-of-fact delivery. 3 divorces sounds like either terrible luck or poor judgment. I said gently. Poor judgment, he admitted. I kept choosing women who wanted to change me instead of accepting who I am. They were attracted to the wealth and status, but they wanted to domesticate the drive and ambition that created those things in the first place. That must have been lonely. Lonely and expensive, he said with a rueful smile. But educational. I know now what I'm looking for in a partner, which is someone who doesn't need me to be different than I am, someone strong enough to stand beside me instead of trying to hide behind me, someone who builds her own life instead of trying to redesign mine. The description felt like a challenge and an invitation rolled into one. William was essentially telling me that he could see through gold diggers and social climbers, that he valued independence and authenticity above conventional feminine compliance. It was exactly what I'd hoped to hear, and exactly what made this situation so dangerous. The more time I spent with him, the harder it became to remember that this was supposed to be about revenge, rather than genuine connection. We walked back to our hotel, a different property where William had booked adjoining suites along the beach. The moon cast silver paths across the water, and the warm sand felt luxurious beneath our feet. Thank you for today, I said, as we reached the hotel's private beach entrance. The property is incredible, and I think your vision for it is exactly right. Does that mean you'd be interested in overseeing the design aspects if I decide to move forward? The question hung between us, loaded with implications that went far beyond professional collaboration. That would depend on the terms, I said carefully. The terms would be very generous, full creative control over the restoration, unlimited budget for authentic materials, and a partnership percentage that would make you quite wealthy if the project succeeds. And if it fails, it won't fail, not with both of us committed to making it work. We were standing close now, close enough that I could see the silver threads in his dark hair, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body in the warm night air. Rachel, he said softly, I want you to know that my interest in you extends far beyond your professional capabilities. I know, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. I also want you to know that I don't play games or make promises I can't keep. If we move forward together professionally or personally, it will be with complete honesty and mutual respect. The irony was so sharp it was almost painful. Here was this man offering me exactly the kind of partnership I'd always claimed to want, and I was deceiving him at the most fundamental level. William, I began, not sure what I intended to say. He leaned down and kissed me, cutting off whatever confession or protestation I might have made. His lips were warm and surprisingly gentle, and for a moment I forgot everything except the sensation of being wanted by a man who saw me as an equal rather than a conquest. When we broke apart, Both of us were breathing hard. I should go upstairs, I said, though every cell in my body was arguing against the decision. Yes, he agreed, but he didn't step away. We should both get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a busy day. Busy? How? I'm making an offer on the Oceana, and I'm hoping you'll agree to be my partner in bringing it back to life. As I rode the elevator to my floor, I realized that I was standing at a crossroads that would determine the entire trajectory of my life. I could continue with my original plan, seduce William to hurt Marcus, then disappear before anyone got seriously damaged, or I could take the leap he was offering and build something real with a man who clearly valued everything I brought to the table. The problem was that both choices required me to live with the consequences of decisions I couldn't undo. In my suite, I found a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket, along with a handwritten note. To new partnerships and beautiful possibilities, sleep well. I poured myself a glass and stood on my balcony, looking out at the dark ocean and trying to sort through the tangled emotions of the day. Somewhere in Manhattan, Marcus was probably cuddled up with his 24-year-old intern, secure in his belief that he'd discarded me without consequences. He had no idea that his father was falling for the woman he'd thrown away. The question was I falling too? And if so, what did that mean for everyone involved in this increasingly complicated game? The conference room at Bennett Holdings occupied an entire floor of the Chrysler Building, with panoramic views of Manhattan that probably intimidated most visitors into submission. Today, it was filled with lawyers, architects, and financial advisors, as William formally made his offer on the Oceana Hotel. I sat beside him, at the massive mahogany table, my laptop open to architectural renderings I'd created during our flight back from Miami. The restoration timeline is aggressive but achievable, I explained to the assembled team, clicking through detailed project phases. Phase 1 involves structural repairs and infrastructure updates, plumbing, electrical, HVAC system. Phase 2 focuses on historical restoration, murals, terrazzo floors, period fixtures. Phase 3 is interior design and modern amenities integration. William's lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Carlisle, studied my projections with obvious approval. The budget projections seem conservative. Most restoration projects of this scope run significantly over estimates. I've built in 20% contingency funds for each phase, I replied. Plus, I have relationships with specialized craftsmen who work exclusively on historical properties. They're expensive, but they're also reliable. And your timeline for profitability? I glanced at William, who nodded encouragingly. Soft opening in 18 months, full operation within 2 years. Based on comparable properties in South Beach, we're projecting 70% occupancy in year 1, climbing to 90% by year 3. The meeting continued for another hour, with every aspect of the acquisition and restoration plans scrutinized in exhaustive detail. By the time the lawyers filed out to prepare the formal offer documents, I felt like I'd passed some kind of corporate initiation ritual. Impressive, Patricia said, shaking my hand as she gathered her files. William, you found yourself quite a partner. After everyone left, William and I remained in the conference room, watching the sun set over Manhattan through the floor-to-ceiling windows. You were magnificent, he said, loosening his tie. Confident, thorough, completely unintimidated by that pack of sharks. They weren't trying to intimidate me. They were doing their jobs, making sure you don't make a $40 million mistake. $42 million, if our offer is accepted. And it's not a mistake, it's an investment in something beautiful and lasting. I studied his profile as he gazed out at the city. Even after spending a weekend with him, William Bennett remained something of a mystery. He was simultaneously ruthless and romantic, calculating and passionate, completely confident in business but surprisingly vulnerable when it came to personal relationships. William, I said carefully, can I ask you something personal? Always. Why haven't you remarried? It's been 5 years since your last divorce. You're successful, attractive, clearly capable of commitment. What's holding you back? He was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. Fear, Probably. Fear of making the same mistakes again. Of choosing someone who wants to change me into something I'm not. And fear of being vulnerable with someone who might actually matter. His eyes sharpened as he turned to look at me. That's very perceptive. It's also very human. We all protect ourselves from the relationships that could actually transform us. Is that what you do, Rachel? Protect yourself from transformation? The question hit closer to home than I was prepared for. I'm starting to think, maybe I've been protecting myself from the wrong things. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I need to take this, he said apologetically. Marcus. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral as William answered the call. What do you want? William's tone was notably cool. There was a pause as Marcus spoke. Then William's eyebrows rose. You want to meet for dinner? Tonight? Why? Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear the faint sound of Marcus's voice through the phone but couldn't make out words. Fine, William said finally. Daniel. 8 o'clock. But I'm bringing someone with me. My blood turned to ice water. He was going to bring me to dinner with Marcus, which would expose our relationship before I was ready to control the narrative. Actually, William continued, on second thought, let's make it somewhere more private. The club, and Marcus, whatever this is about, it better be important. He hung up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. That was unexpected, he said. My son wants to have dinner tonight. Claims he has something important to discuss. A family business? I asked, hoping my voice sounded casual. With Marcus, it's usually money. He's probably looking for funding for some new venture or trying to talk me into backing one of his marketing schemes. I felt a surge of panic. What if Marcus had figured out who I was? What if he planned to expose my connection to him in front of his father? Maybe I should go home, I said. Give you privacy for your family discussion. Absolutely not, William said firmly. We're partners now, Rachel. Besides, it's time Marcus met the woman who's going to be working closely with the family business. The irony was so thick, I nearly choked on it. Marcus was about to meet the woman who'd been working closely with him for 3 years, though he'd obviously never bothered to learn much about my professional capabilities during that time. Are you sure that's wise? First meetings with adult children can be delicate, especially when there's already tension in the relationship. William moved closer, taking my hands in his. Rachel, I need you to understand something. What's happening between us isn't casual for me. I don't introduce women to my family unless I'm serious about them. How serious? I whispered. Serious enough that I want my son to know you exist. Serious enough that I don't care if he approves or not. He leaned down and kissed me, and for a moment I forgot about Marcus, about revenge, about everything except the way William made me feel valued and desired and intellectually challenged all at once. When we broke apart, he smiled. Besides, I'm curious to see what you make of him. You're an excellent judge of character. 3 hours later, I sat in the back of William's Mercedes, my palms sweating despite the car's perfect climate control. I'd changed into a black wrap dress that was elegant but not ostentatious, and I'd spent an hour practicing expressions in the mirror. Surprise, pleasure at meeting him, polite interest in his life. The Manhattan Club was exactly the kind of old money establishment where powerful men had been making deals for over a century. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs worn smooth by generations of wealthy backsides, and an atmosphere of whispered conversations and subtle power plays. Marcus was already seated in a corner booth when we arrived, and I had to admire his poker face when he saw me walk in beside his father. His expression flickered for just a moment. Shock, confusion, perhaps a hint of panic before settling into polite curiosity. Dad, he said, rising to greet William with a handshake that looked more formal than affectionate. Thank you for making time tonight. Marcus, I'd like you to meet Rachel Hayes. Rachel, my son Marcus. I extended my hand with a smile that I hoped conveyed pleasant surprise rather than calculated manipulation. It's lovely to meet you, Marcus. Your father speaks of you often. Marcus took my hand, and I felt the slight tremor that told me he was fighting to maintain his composure. Rachel Hayes, he repeated slowly, as if testing the name. Have we met before? You look familiar. I don't think so, I replied smoothly. Though Manhattan can feel like a small town sometimes, we probably move in similar circles. William settled into the booth beside me, his hand resting possessively on my back. Rachel is my new business partner. She's going to be overseeing the design aspects of the Miami project. Miami project? Marcus looked genuinely confused. The Oceana Hotel. We're buying it, restoring it to its original glory. Rachel has an exceptional eye for historical preservation. I watched Marcus process this information, seeing him struggle to reconcile the woman he'd dismissed as a learning experience with someone his father considered worthy of major business partnership. That sounds like a significant investment, Marcus said carefully. Are you sure the Miami market can support another luxury property? The numbers work, William replied curtly. But I didn't come here to discuss my business decisions with you. You said you had something important to talk about. Marcus glanced at me, clearly uncomfortable discussing family matters in front of a stranger. Maybe we could speak privately. Rachel is about to become a significant part of my life, both professionally and personally. William said, whatever you have to say, you can say in front of her. I felt a stab of guilt at the pride in his voice. William genuinely believed he'd found someone who shared his values and vision, someone who could be a true partner in building something lasting. The reality that I was here specifically to destroy his relationship with his son felt increasingly ugly. All right, Marcus said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. I wanted to give you this in person. William opened the envelope and extracted what appeared to be a wedding invitation. His eyebrows rose as he read it. You're getting married, he said flatly. Next month. I know it's short notice, but Brittany and I didn't want a long engagement. Brittany, William repeated, and I could hear the distaste in his voice. The intern? The woman I love, Marcus corrected, his jaw tightening. And I'd appreciate it if you could at least pretend to be happy for me. How can I be happy about watching my son make the same mistakes I made at his age? Marrying someone based on infatuation rather than compatibility. Someone who wants you to take care of her rather than someone who can stand beside you as an equal partner. The words hit me like physical blows. William was describing exactly the kind of relationship I'd thought I had with Marcus, though from Marcus's perspective, I'd apparently been the strong, independent partner he didn't want. Brittany isn't like that, Marcus protested. She's sweet, supportive, and genuinely caring. She makes me feel like I can conquer the world, because she tells you what you want to hear instead of challenging you to be better. William shot back. Real partnership isn't about ego stroking. Marcus, it's about finding someone who complements your strengths and compensates for your weaknesses. He glanced at me as he said this, and I felt another stab of guilt at the sincerity in his eyes. Like Rachel, Marcus said quietly, his gaze fixed on my face. Someone accomplished and intelligent who doesn't need you to take care of her. Exactly like Rachel, William agreed, his hand finding mine under the table. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Marcus continued to study my face. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out if this was somehow connected to our breakup, if I deliberately targeted his father as some kind of revenge scheme. Well, Marcus said finally, I hope you'll both come to the wedding. I'd like Brittany to meet the woman who's captured my father's attention so completely. We'll be there, William said, though his tone suggested he'd rather attend a root canal. As we said our goodbyes and prepared to leave, Marcus caught my arm. Rachel, he said quietly, could I speak with you for just a moment? Privately. William frowned, but nodded. I'll wait in the car. After William left, Marcus and I stood facing each other in the club's elegant foyer. The moment felt surreal. 3 months ago, this man had been planning to marry me. Now he was trying to figure out if I was playing some kind of long game with his father. What's your angle here? He asked bluntly. I don't know what you mean. Cut the shit, Rachel. 3 months ago you were devastated when I left you. Now you're suddenly involved with my father. That's either the most incredible coincidence in history or the most elaborate revenge scheme I've ever seen. I met his gaze steadily. Maybe you overestimated how devastated I was. Maybe I realized I'd dodged a bullet when you chose someone else, and maybe you're lying through your teeth. Think whatever you want, Marcus. Your opinion stopped mattering to me the day you decided I wasn't young enough for your taste. His face flushed red. This isn't about age, and you know it. Then what was it about? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you wanted someone who would worship you instead of challenge you. Someone grateful enough for your attention to never question your decisions or expect to be treated as an equal. The accuracy of my assessment clearly stung. Your father appreciates different qualities in a woman, I continued. He values intelligence, independence, the ability to build something meaningful together. It's refreshing to be with a man who sees me as a partner rather than a project. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing whether to warn his father about our previous relationship, or to let this play out and see what damage I might do. If you hurt him, he said finally, I'll destroy you. If I hurt him, I replied, I'll deserve whatever consequences come with that choice. As I walked out to join William in the car, I realized that Marcus's threat was actually a gift. He'd given me fair warning that my deception wouldn't go unpunished if it was discovered, which meant I needed to decide very quickly whether I was willing to risk everything for revenge. How did that go? William asked as I settled beside him in the back seat. He's protective of you, I said truthfully. He wanted to make sure my intentions were honorable. And what did you tell him? That they are. William smiled and took my hand. Good. Because I have something I want to discuss with you. What's that? I want you to move in with me. Not immediately, take whatever time you need to think about it. But I want to build a life with you, Rachel. I want to wake up beside you and fall asleep holding you and spend every day working towards something beautiful together. As his words sank in, I realized I was standing at the point of no return. I could confess everything right now, my relationship with Marcus, my original motivation for pursuing William, my lies and manipulations, and hope that the connection we'd built was strong enough to survive the truth. Or I could continue down this path and accept that I was no longer seeking revenge against Marcus. I was falling in love with his father, and that changed everything about the game I thought I was playing. William, I began, my heart hammering against my ribs. Don't answer tonight, he said gently. Think about it. We have time. But as I looked into his trusting eyes, I realized that time was exactly what we didn't have. Because Marcus knew who I was, and he was going to be watching my every move from now on. The question was whether I could find a way to tell William the truth before his son had the chance to destroy us both. The morning of Marcus's wedding dawned crisp and clear, with that perfect October light that made Manhattan look like a postcard. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror adjusting the emerald green silk dress I'd chosen for the occasion, elegant enough to fit the upscale venue but striking enough to make a statement. William had picked me up at 7 for the drive to the Hamptons, and we'd spent the hour discussing everything except the obvious tension surrounding this event. You seem nervous, William observed as we pulled through the gates of the exclusive estate where the ceremony was being held. It's just a wedding. Your son's wedding, I corrected. The first time you'll meet his bride, and only the second time he'll see us together. These family dynamics can be complicated. What I didn't say was that I was terrified Marcus had spent the past month planning some kind of dramatic revelation that would destroy both William and me in front of 100 witnesses. The smart play would have been to confess everything to William before we arrived, but every time I'd tried to find the words, I'd lost my nerve. The venue was spectacular, a sprawling waterfront estate with manicured gardens and a view of the Sound that probably cost more per hour than most people's annual salaries. Guests were already arriving, a mix of Manhattan society types and younger professionals from Marcus's business world. William, there you are. A blonde woman in her 50s approached us with the kind of determined smile that suggested she had an agenda. I'm Sarah Bennett, Marcus's aunt. And you must be the famous Rachel we've been hearing so much about. I shook her hand, noting the way she emphasized famous as if it were code for something less flattering. It's lovely to meet you, I replied. Marcus seems to have wonderful family support for his big day. Oh, we're all very close, Sarah said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in obvious evaluation. Though I have to say, William, she's not quite what we expected. What exactly were you expecting? William's voice carried a warning edge that made Sarah step back slightly. Just someone more age-appropriate, I suppose. But then again, you've always been unconventional in your choices. The barely veiled insult hung in the air for a moment before William responded with ice-cold courtesy. Rachel is 32, successful, and brilliant. If that's inappropriate for a man my age, then I'm clearly doing something right. As Sarah retreated with a flustered expression, I felt a mix of gratitude and guilt. William was defending me against his own family, completely unaware that their instincts about me might actually be correct. I'm sorry about that, he said quietly. Some people have very narrow definitions of suitable relationships. It's fine. I'm used to people making assumptions about successful women who date older men. It's not fine, and you shouldn't have to get used to it. We found our seats in the third row, close enough to see everything but far enough back to avoid being the center of attention. As guests filled the folding chairs arranged on the lawn, I spotted several faces I recognized from Manhattan's social scene: business associates, charity board members, the kind of people who would remember this wedding and gossip about it for months. The processional music began, and Marcus appeared at the makeshift altar looking nervous but genuinely happy. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo and the expression of a man who believed he was getting everything he'd ever wanted. When his eyes briefly met mine across the crowd, I saw a flicker of wariness but no immediate hostility. Then Brittany appeared at the end of the aisle, and I had to admit she was stunning. The ivory silk gown showed off her petite figure perfectly, and her blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate updo that must have taken hours to achieve. She looked like a fairy tale princess, all youth and innocence and radiant joy. More importantly, she looked at Marcus like he'd hung the stars specifically for her entertainment. As they exchanged vows, Marcus promising to cherish and protect her, Brittany pledging to support and honor him, I found myself thinking about the different ways people could love each other. Marcus clearly needed to be worshipped, to feel like a hero in his own love story. Brittany needed to be protected and provided for, to feel safe in someone else's capable hands. It was actually a perfect match, even if it wasn't the kind of partnership William valued. Do you think they'll be happy? I whispered to William during the ring exchange. They'll be happy until she grows up and realizes she wants more than being someone's beautiful accessory, he whispered back. Or until he gets bored with being adored and starts looking for a new challenge. The cynicism in his voice was jarring, but probably accurate. Marcus had left me for someone younger and more adoring. What would stop him from repeating the pattern when Brittany inevitably developed her own opinions and ambitions? The ceremony concluded with enthusiastic applause and a shower of rose petals as the newlyweds walked back down the aisle. Marcus paused briefly when he reached our row, his eyes locking with mine for a moment that felt charged with unfinished business. Congratulations, I said clearly enough for nearby guests to hear. She's lovely, thank you, he replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. I hope you'll both join us for the reception. I'd love for you to get to know Brittany better. The reception was held in an enormous white tent, decorated with thousands of white flowers and crystal chandeliers that must have cost more than most people's cars. Our table was strategically placed, close enough to the family section to indicate William's importance, but far enough away to avoid being drawn into family politics. I was making polite conversation with a hedge fund manager's wife when William's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and frowned. Everything all right? I asked. Marcus wants to speak with me privately. Says it's important. He showed me the message. Need to talk. Meet me in the study in 10 minutes. Come alone. My blood turned to ice water. This was it. Marcus was going to tell his father about our relationship, probably with whatever spin would make me look worse and him look more sympathetic. Maybe I should come with you, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. He specifically said alone. It's probably wedding nerves, or some issue with the trust fund. I'll be back in a few minutes. As William walked away, I sat frozen in my chair, watching the celebration continue around me while my carefully constructed world prepared to collapse. I had maybe 10 minutes before Marcus destroyed everything I'd built with his father, 10 minutes to decide whether to run or stay and face the consequences. The smart choice was obvious. Leave now, disappear before William returned with hatred in his eyes, and the truth burning in his throat. I could be gone before anyone noticed, could reinvent myself somewhere else and pretend this had never happened. But as I watched William's distinguished figure disappear into the main house, I realized I couldn't run. Not because I was brave, but because somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about revenge against Marcus and started being about something real with William. I loved him. Despite my original motives, despite the lies I'd told, despite the inevitable disaster approaching at light speed, I loved William Bennett with an intensity that terrified me, which meant I had to stay and fight for whatever chance we might have left. I made my way through the crowd, toward the main house, my heart hammering against my ribs. If I was going to lose everything, I at least wanted to control the narrative of my own destruction. The study was easy to find. Voices carried through the partially closed door, and I could hear both Marcus and William speaking in low, tense tones. I positioned myself just outside, close enough to hear but hidden from view. "You need to know who she really is," Marcus was saying. "Dad, Rachel Hayes isn't some random woman who happened to fall for you. She's my ex-girlfriend." Silence. Then William's voice, deadly calm. "Explain. We lived together for 3 years. I was going to propose until I realized we weren't compatible long-term. I broke up with her 3 months ago, and now suddenly she's dating you. That's not a coincidence. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting she's using you to get back at me. Think about it, she targets the one man guaranteed to hurt me most if she can turn him against me. It's the perfect revenge scheme." Another long silence. When William spoke again, his voice was even colder. "And you're telling me this now, because I care about you, despite our differences. Because I don't want to see you manipulated by someone who doesn't genuinely care about you. How thoughtful of you to be concerned about my welfare." I could hear the sarcasm in William's tone, but I couldn't tell if he was angry at Marcus for the revelation, or at me for the deception. "Dad, I know we don't see eye to eye on most things, but I wouldn't lie about something this serious. Rachel Hayes was my girlfriend until 3 months ago. Check if you don't believe me, there are plenty of photos of us together at social events. Witnesses who can confirm our relationship." "I don't need to check," William said quietly. "Because you're absolutely right." My heart stopped. "She is using me to hurt you," William continued. "The question is, why are you telling me this on your wedding day instead of enjoying your new wife?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that if you were truly happy with Brittany, if you were confident in your choice to leave Rachel for a younger woman, you wouldn't care who she's dating now. The fact that you're here, on what should be the happiest day of your life, trying to sabotage her relationship with me, suggests that maybe you're not as satisfied with your choices as you pretend to be. This isn't about me having second thoughts. This is about protecting you from someone who's playing games with your emotions." "Marcus," William said, and his voice carried a note of finality that made my stomach clench. "You made your choice 3 months ago when you decided Rachel wasn't good enough for you. Now you get to live with watching me discover exactly how wrong you were." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Rachel may have started this as a revenge scheme, but what she found was a man who appreciates everything you were too blind to value. Her intelligence, her independence, her ability to be a true partner instead of a beautiful ornament." I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from making a sound. William knew, he knew about my deception, and he was choosing me anyway. "You can't be serious," Marcus said. "She lied to you. She's been manipulating you from the beginning." "Yes, she has. And despite that, She's shown me more genuine partnership and intellectual stimulation in 2 months than your mother showed me in 10 years of marriage. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Dad, please, think about what you're saying. You can't trust someone who's capable of this level of deception. Can't I? Let me ask you something, Marcus. When you were with Rachel, did she ever try to change you into someone you weren't? Did she demand expensive gifts or try to control your business decisions? Did she seem more interested in your money than your mind? A pause. Then, reluctantly, no, because Rachel Hayes is exactly the kind of woman I've been looking for my entire life. Someone strong enough to stand beside me, intelligent enough to challenge me, and independent enough that I know she's choosing to be with me rather than needing to be with me. But she doesn't actually care about you. This whole thing is fake. Marcus, William said with devastating gentleness, you're 24 hours married to a woman who worships you, and you're in here trying to destroy my relationship with your ex-girlfriend. Which one of us do you think is more invested in something fake? The silence that followed was deafening. I could picture Marcus standing there, his wedding day triumph turned to ash as he realized his father had not only seen through my deception but chosen to embrace it. I should get back to my wife, Marcus said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Yes, you should. And Marcus, if you ever try to interfere in my relationship with Rachel again, you'll discover just how unforgiving I can be when someone threatens something I value. I heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, ducking into a nearby powder room just as Marcus emerged. Through the crack in the door, I watched him walk past, his face a mask of frustrated defeat. A moment later, William appeared in the hallway, his expression thoughtful. He paused, looking around as if sensing my presence, then called out softly, Rachel? I know you're here somewhere. We need to talk. I emerged from the powder room, my face burning with shame and my hands trembling. You knew, I said. You knew who I was. I suspected from the moment Marcus said your name at dinner. It was confirmed when I saw the way you both reacted to each other. Why didn't you say anything? William stepped closer, his gray eyes searching my face. Because I wanted to see what you would choose. Revenge? Or something real? And what do you think I've chosen? I think you came here tonight knowing Marcus might expose everything, and you stayed anyway. I think you've had dozens of opportunities to hurt me financially, emotionally, professionally, and instead you've made me happier than I've been in years. Tears I hadn't realized were falling streaked down my cheeks. William, I'm so sorry, I never meant for it to become real, he finished softly. Rachel, the most beautiful things in life often come from the most complicated beginnings. The question isn't how this started. The question is, where do we go from here? I looked into his eyes and saw everything I'd been afraid to hope for, understanding, forgiveness, and something that looked remarkably like love. I want to go forward, I whispered. Together. If you'll have me. He cupped my face in his hands, thumbs brushing away my tears. Rachel Hayes, you magnificent, complicated, brilliant woman. I think I fell in love with you the moment you chose honesty over strategy. As he kissed me in the hallway of his son's wedding reception, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy, it's building something so beautiful with their cast-offs that they can never stop regretting what they threw away. Through the windows I could see Marcus dancing with his new wife, both of them smiling for the cameras while their marriage began with the shadow of his father's happiness falling across their celebration. The game was over, and everyone had gotten exactly what they deserved. 6 months later, I stood on the restored terrace of the Oceana Hotel, watching the Miami sunset paint the Art Deco facade in shades of gold and coral. The grand reopening was 3 days away, and every detail was perfect, from the hand-restored terrazzo floors to the recreated murals that brought the lobby back to its 1940s glory. But tonight, the hotel was hosting a different kind of celebration. Mrs. Bennett, the event coordinator said, approaching with a clipboard and a slightly frazzled expression, the photographer wants to do a few more shots of you and Mr. Bennett in the ballroom before the guests arrive. Mrs. Bennett. I still wasn't entirely used to the name, even though William and I had been married for 3 months. The wedding had been small and elegant. A private ceremony at the Metropolitan Museum surrounded by the art that had brought us together, followed by dinner for 50 of our closest friends and family. Marcus and Brittany had attended, though their presence had been more of an obligation than celebration. Brittany had looked stunning in a pale pink dress that emphasized her youth, while Marcus had spent the evening making polite conversation and avoiding prolonged eye contact with his new stepmother, a woman exactly 8 months older than him. "Tell him we'll be right there," I said to the coordinator. "Is everything else on schedule?" "Perfect timing. The champagne is chilled, the catering staff is ready, and the musicians are setting up in the lobby. This is going to be spectacular." Tonight's event was officially a fundraiser for the Metropolitan Museum's acquisition fund, but really it was a victory lap, disguised as philanthropy. The guest list read like a who's who of Manhattan society. Everyone who had witnessed my transformation from Marcus's discarded girlfriend to William Bennett's wife and business partner. I made my way through the restored hotel, checking last-minute details and greeting staff members. The Oceana had become my masterpiece, the project that proved I belonged in William's world as more than just arm candy. Every major design magazine had featured our restoration, and I'd been invited to speak at architecture conferences from New York to London. More importantly, the hotel was profitable. We'd achieved 90% occupancy within 2 months of opening, and the waiting list for our penthouse suites stretched through the following summer. "There's my brilliant wife," William said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. Even in his 70s, he commanded attention. Silver hair perfectly styled, custom tuxedo fitting his tall frame like it had been painted on, gray eyes sharp with intelligence and humor. "Your brilliant business partner," I corrected, accepting the champagne with a smile. "Wife is just my part-time job." "Is that so?" And here I thought keeping me happy was a full-time occupation. "Please. You're low maintenance compared to historically accurate terrazzo restoration." We'd developed this easy banter over the months, a partnership that worked on every level. William challenged me intellectually and supported my professional ambitions, while I brought energy and fresh perspectives to his empire. The age difference that had seemed so scandalous to Manhattan society had become irrelevant in the face of our obvious compatibility. "Are you ready for tonight?" he asked, his hand finding mine as we walked toward the ballroom. "Are you asking if I'm nervous about being scrutinized by 300 people who remember when I was dating your son? I'm asking if you're prepared to enjoy watching those same people kiss your ass, because you've become more successful than any of them imagined possible." I laughed, appreciating his bluntness. "When you put it like that, I'm absolutely ready." The ballroom looked magnificent. Crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the restored Art Deco details, round tables draped in ivory silk, and centerpieces of white orchids that complemented the geometric patterns in the original tilework. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the ocean stretched endlessly under a star-filled sky. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," the photographer called out, "could we get some shots by the windows? The ocean view is spectacular tonight." As we posed for photos, I caught sight of our reflection in the window glass. William tall and distinguished, me elegant in midnight blue silk that brought out the green in my eyes. We looked like what we'd become, a power couple who'd built something beautiful together. "Perfect," the photographer said, snapping away. "The magazines are going to love these. The Art Deco revival. How William Bennett and his wife transformed a forgotten landmark into Miami's hottest destination. Don't forget the business angel," I added. The restoration generated 300 local jobs and contributed $12 million to the regional economy last year. "See?" William murmured in my ear. "Brilliant and beautiful." Guests began arriving as the sun disappeared completely, and I moved into hostess mode, greeting donors, introducing people who should know each other, and making sure everyone felt valued and welcomed. It was a skill I'd developed over months of similar events, the ability to work a room while genuinely enjoying the conversations. "Rachel." Diana appeared beside me, resplendent in emerald green that made her dark hair gleam. "This place is incredible. I can't believe you pulled this off." "We pulled it off," I corrected, gesturing toward William, who was deep in conversation with a group of potential investors. This was always a team effort. Still, 6 months ago you were crying in my guest room over Marcus's betrayal. Now look at you, married to a billionaire, running a successful business, and hosting charity events that raise millions for good causes. Life has a way of working out, I said diplomatically. Life has a way of working out when you're smart enough to turn a devastating breakup into the best thing that ever happened to you. Before I could respond, I spotted familiar figures entering the ballroom. Marcus and Brittany, he in a black tuxedo that couldn't quite hide his slight weight gain, she in a silver dress that was beautiful but somehow seemed to diminish her rather than enhance her natural prettiness. Well, well, Diana murmured, following my gaze. The prodigal son arrives. This should be interesting. Marcus and Brittany made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations on their 6-month marriage and fielding questions about Marcus's business. His marketing firm was doing well enough, but nothing that compared to the empire his father had built or the success story I'd become. Rachel, Brittany said when they reached us, her smile bright but slightly strained. The hotel is absolutely gorgeous. You must be so proud. Thank you, I replied warmly. It's been an incredible project. How are you both? Married life treating you well? Wonderfully, Marcus said, though something in his eyes suggested otherwise. Though we're keeping busy, I'm expanding the agency, and Brittany's thinking about going back to school. Back to school? Diana asked with polite interest. I'm considering a master's program in nonprofit management, Brittany explained. I'd like to do something more meaningful than just, well, more meaningful. The implication was clear. Being Marcus's wife wasn't providing the fulfillment she'd expected. I felt a flash of sympathy for the girl, remembering my own frustrations with feeling like an accessory rather than a partner. That sounds wonderful, I said sincerely. There are some excellent programs in New York. If you'd like, I can put you in touch with the director of our foundation. She might have insights about combining education with practical experience. Brittany's face lit up with genuine gratitude. That would be amazing. Thank you. Marcus's expression tightened slightly at the exchange. Even 6 months later, he seemed uncomfortable with any reminder that I'd moved beyond our relationship into something bigger and more successful. Excuse me, he said abruptly. I need to speak with some potential clients. As he walked away, Brittany's bright smile faltered for just a moment. Sorry about that. He's been under a lot of stress lately. Marriage is an adjustment, I said gently. It takes time to figure out how to be a team. How do you and William make it look so easy? You both have such demanding careers, but you seem so connected. I glanced across the room where William was holding court with a group of museum board members, his hands gesturing expressively as he made some point about art acquisition strategies. Even in a crowded room, I could feel the invisible thread that connected us. Shared values, mutual respect, genuine partnership. I think it's because we want the same things, I said finally. Not just the lifestyle or the social status, but the deeper stuff. We both believe in building things that last, in using success to create beauty and meaning. When you're aligned on that level, the rest gets easier. Brittany nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Sometimes I feel like Marcus and I want different things, but we're both afraid to admit it. Before I could respond to that loaded statement, William appeared at my elbow. Ladies, he said, kissing my cheek and shaking Brittany's hand. Brittany, you look lovely tonight. How are you enjoying married life? It's an adventure, she said diplomatically. All the best things are. Rachel and I were just discussing how Miami has exceeded our projections for the first quarter. Success is always sweeter when it's shared with the right partner. The comment was gentle but pointed, a reminder that real partnerships were built on more than just attraction and shared demographics. Speaking of which, William continued, I need to steal my wife for a moment. The museum director wants to discuss our next acquisition, and Rachel has opinions about the contemporary wing that he needs to hear. As we moved away, I heard Brittany sigh softly. Whatever paradise she'd expected to find in marriage to Marcus wasn't materializing the way she'd hoped. "That was kind of you," William said as we walked toward the museum director, offering to help her with graduate school connections. "She's not a bad person, just young, and discovering that marrying someone to feel safe isn't the same as marrying someone who makes you feel alive." Speaking from experience, speaking from observation, I never felt safe with Marcus. I felt challenged and frustrated, and constantly off balance, which turned out to be exactly what I needed, even if I didn't realize it at the time. And with me, I stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "With you, I feel like I can be everything I'm capable of becoming. Supported but not diminished, challenged but not threatened, loved but not consumed." That's quite possibly the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. "Just wait until you see what I've planned for our 1-year anniversary." The evening continued with speeches about the importance of arts funding and preservation. William spoke eloquently about the responsibility that came with wealth, the obligation to use resources in service of beauty and culture rather than just personal accumulation. When it was my turn to address the crowd, I talked about the intersection of business and artistry, about how the most successful projects were those that served both profit and purpose. The Oceana Hotel exists because someone had the vision to see beauty in decay and the courage to invest in restoration rather than destruction. I said, looking out at the sea of faces, but more than that, it exists because partnerships, whether personal or professional, work best when they're built on shared values and mutual respect. I caught sight of Marcus in the crowd, his expression unreadable as he listened to me speak about partnership to an audience that included his father and his wife. Brittany stood beside him, but her attention was clearly focused on my words, rather than her husband's reaction to them. When we choose to build rather than tear down, to create rather than consume, to support rather than compete, that's when real magic happens. That's when we create things that last. The applause was enthusiastic, and several people approached afterward to discuss potential collaborations and investments. As the evening wound down, I found myself talking with a group of young entrepreneurs who were interested in sustainable tourism and historic preservation. "The key is finding projects that serve multiple stakeholders," I explained. "Investors need returns, communities need economic development, and culture needs preservation. When you can align all those interests, everyone wins." "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of," said Jennifer Walsh, a development consultant from Los Angeles. "Too many people see business and social responsibility as mutually exclusive." "That's old thinking," I replied. "The most successful companies today are those that understand they have obligations beyond just shareholder profits." As the group dispersed, I noticed Marcus lingering nearby, clearly wanting to speak with me privately. I excused myself from the remaining guests and walked over to where he stood by the windows overlooking the ocean. "That was quite a speech," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Thank you. The work speaks for itself." "Does it? Or are you still playing the same game you started 6 months ago, just with higher stakes?" I studied his face in the dim light, noting the lines of stress around his eyes, the slight softness around his jaw that suggested he wasn't taking care of himself the way he used to. "What game would that be, Marcus? The one where you prove you're better than me by succeeding with my father? The one where you turn our entire relationship into a footnote in your success story? Is that what you think this is about? Proving I'm better than you? Isn't it?" I was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the moonlight on the water, and thinking about everything that had brought me to this point. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said finally. "For the first month after you left me, I was devastated. I thought my world had ended, that I'd never find anyone who could love me the way I thought you did." "I did love you." "No, Marcus. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a successful, attractive girlfriend who made you look good at business events and didn't embarrass you in front of your colleagues. But you never actually loved me. The person who had opinions and ambitions and needs of her own." "That's not true, isn't it? When did you ever ask about my dreams, beyond being your wife? When did you ever suggest we work together on a project, the way William and I do?" When did you ever look at me and see a partner instead of just a beautiful accessory? Marcus was quiet, and I could see him struggling with the accuracy of my assessment. The difference between you and your father, I continued, is that William fell in love with my mind first. My ambitions, my capabilities, my potential. The physical attraction was secondary to the intellectual and emotional connection. And you think that makes your relationship more valid than mine? I think it makes our relationship more sustainable. William doesn't need me to be smaller so he can feel bigger. He doesn't need me to worship him so he can feel important. He wants me to be everything I'm capable of becoming, because that makes both of us stronger. And what about Brittany? Are you saying she's making a mistake? I looked across the room where Brittany was talking animatedly with Diana about graduate school options, her face more alive than I'd seen it all evening. I'm saying she's 24 years old with her whole life ahead of her. If she's already feeling restless and unfulfilled, you might want to ask yourself why that is. She's not restless, Marcus. She just told me she wants to go back to school because being your wife isn't meaningful enough for her. That's not a criticism of you personally. It's an indication that she needs more than what you're currently offering. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working, as he processed what I'd said. So what then? You get everything you want, and I get to watch my marriage fall apart? You get to decide what kind of husband you want to be, I said gently. You can see Brittany's growing independence as a threat to be managed, or you can see it as an opportunity to build something deeper and more sustainable together. Like you and my father have done, like your father and I are doing every day. It's not a destination, Marcus. It's a choice you make over and over again. William appeared beside us, his hands settling on my back in that familiar gesture of casual intimacy. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but the car is waiting, and we have an early morning tomorrow. Of course, Marcus said, straightening up and assuming his public persona again. Thank you for including us tonight. The hotel really is spectacular. Thank you for coming, I replied. And Marcus, take care of yourself, and take care of Brittany. She's a good person who deserves to be happy. As we walked toward the exit, William squeezed my hand gently. That looked like a serious conversation, he observed. Just some unfinished business finally getting finished. Any regrets? I thought about the question as we stepped out into the warm Miami night. A year ago, I'd been planning to marry Marcus, building my life around his schedule and his ambitions, accepting a smaller version of myself because I thought that's what love required. Now I was married to a man who celebrated my successes instead of being threatened by them, who wanted me to take up more space in the world rather than less, who saw my independence as an asset rather than a liability. None at all, I said. Meaning it completely. As our car pulled away from the Oceana, I caught a glimpse of Marcus and Brittany on the hotel steps. She was looking up at the building with obvious admiration, while he was checking his phone. Even from a distance I could see the disconnect between them. Two people who'd married for the wrong reasons, and were only beginning to understand the consequences. Do you think they'll figure it out? William asked, following my gaze. Maybe, if Marcus can learn to see Brittany as a person instead of just a reflection of his ego. If Brittany can find the courage to ask for what she actually needs instead of settling for what feels safe. And if they can't, then they'll get divorced, and hopefully they'll both learn something useful for their next relationships. William laughed, appreciating my practical assessment. You know, when I first realized what you were doing, using me to get revenge on Marcus, I thought you were remarkably ruthless. And now I think you're remarkably wise. You saw an opportunity to transform a devastating betrayal into something beautiful, and you had the courage to take it. Even when it meant risking everything you'd built. I leaned against his shoulder as Miami's lights blurred past the car windows. The best revenge, I said quietly, isn't destroying your enemy. It's building something so magnificent with what they discarded that they can never stop regretting their choices. Is that what this is? Revenge? No, I said, turning to meet his eyes. This is love, but it also happens to be the most perfect revenge I could have imagined. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation that made me smile. Brittany Walsh, formerly Bennett, was marrying a nonprofit director she'd met in graduate school. The ceremony would be small and intimate, the invitation said, focused on family and close friends who supported their shared commitment to meaningful work. Marcus's name was nowhere on the invitation. I heard through Manhattan's gossip network that their divorce had been amicable, no fighting over assets, no public drama, just two people who'd finally admitted they wanted different things from life. Brittany was pursuing her master's degree in nonprofit management while working part-time for a children's literacy foundation. Marcus was dating a succession of 20-somethings and claiming to be happier than ever. I sent Brittany a generous wedding gift and a note congratulating her on finding the courage to build the life she actually wanted. I never heard back, but I hadn't expected to. As for me, I was 7 months pregnant with my first child and planning the expansion of the Bennett Foundation's education initiative. William and I had decided to focus our philanthropic efforts on providing scholarship opportunities for young women pursuing careers in architecture and design. Breaking the cycle, as William put it, of women feeling like they have to choose between professional success and personal happiness. Sometimes, late at night, when I felt the baby moving inside me, I thought about the chain of events that had brought me to this point. Marcus's betrayal had felt like the end of the world, but it had actually been the beginning of something infinitely better. I'd set out to destroy him through his father, and instead I'd discovered what it felt like to be truly loved and valued by someone who saw my strength as an asset rather than a threat. The game was over, and everyone had ended up exactly where they belonged. Marcus had his series of young admirers who told him what he wanted to hear. Brittany had found someone who supported her ambitions, instead of expecting her to abandon them. And I had William, brilliant, complicated, endlessly fascinating William, who challenged me to be better every single day and loved me not, despite my independence, but because of it. Sometimes the most perfect revenge is simply living well. But sometimes, it's also falling in love with your ex's father and building an empire together. In my case, it happened to be both. The penthouse office of Bennett Holdings buzzed with controlled energy as I reviewed the quarterly reports for our latest acquisition, a chain of boutique hotels across the Mediterranean that we were converting into sustainable luxury destinations. My assistant knocked softly before entering with a stack of documents requiring my signature. Mrs. Bennett, the environmental impact assessment for the Santorini property just arrived. And there's a call from the mayor of Barcelona about the community development project. I glanced up from the financial projections, noting how natural it felt to be addressed by my married name in this context. The woman who had once been dismissed as Marcus's learning experience now commanded respect in boardrooms from New York to Monaco. "Tell the mayor I'll call him back in 20 minutes, I said, signing off on a 7-figure renovation budget. "And please ask Mr. Bennett to join me when he's finished with the infrastructure team." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows I could see Central Park beginning to show hints of autumn color. Our daughter Emma, now 4 years old, would be starting ballet lessons next week. A decision we'd made together after she'd spent an entire morning spinning around the living room, declaring herself a princess dancer. William appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression he got when complicated deals fell into place exactly as planned. "The Barcelona architects just approved our green building modifications," he announced, settling into the chair across from my desk. "We'll be the first luxury hotel chain in Europe to achieve carbon neutrality while maintaining 5-star ratings. That's going to look incredible in the sustainability report," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Plus, the tax incentives alone will improve our profit margins by 12%. My brilliant wife, always thinking 3 moves ahead. We'd fallen into this rhythm over the years, professional collaboration so seamless it felt like an elaborate dance, each of us anticipating the other's thoughts and building on shared visions. The Bennett empire had grown exponentially under our joint leadership, but more importantly, it had evolved into something that created value beyond just financial returns. "Speaking of thinking ahead," William continued, "I've been considering something that I wanted to discuss with you. The succession planning we talked about last month, partly, but also something more immediate." He pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and set it on my desk. I've been offered a position on the International Cultural Preservation Council. It would mean traveling extensively, overseeing restoration projects from Prague to Kyoto. I opened the folder, scanning through letters from UNESCO representatives and museum directors around the world. The position was clearly prestigious, the kind of opportunity that could cement William's legacy as more than just a successful businessman. "This is incredible," I said, genuinely excited for him. "When would it start?" "Next spring. The commitment is 3 years with possible extension." He paused, studying my reaction carefully. "The question is whether you'd be interested in taking a more active leadership role here while I'm focused on international work." The implications hit me immediately. William was essentially offering to hand over day-to-day control of a multi-billion-dollar empire so he could pursue meaningful work on a global scale. It was the kind of trust that went far beyond romantic love. It was recognition of me as a true equal partner in every sense. "You want me to run Bennett Holdings," I said slowly. "I want us to expand our impact in different directions. You've proven yourself a dozen times over in hospitality and real estate development. This would be your chance to shape the entire company according to your vision." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a call from Emma's school. I answered quickly, expecting routine scheduling information. "Mrs. Bennett? This is Principal Martinez. Emma is fine, but there was a small incident during recess that we'd like to discuss with you." My maternal instincts immediately sharpened. What kind of incident? Another student was making fun of a classmate's lunch, saying it looked gross and foreign. Emma apparently stood up and gave quite a speech about how different cultures have different foods, and that making fun of people for being different was mean and stupid. I felt a surge of pride mixed with slight concern about my daughter's diplomatic skills. And then what happened? Well, she organized the other children to share different parts of their lunches with the boy who was being teased. By the end of recess, everyone was trying foods from 5 different countries and asking to learn more about each other's families. William, who could hear both sides of the conversation, was grinning broadly. "She's not in trouble," the principal continued. "We actually wanted to commend her leadership and ask if she might be interested in helping plan our upcoming Cultural Diversity Week." After hanging up, I looked at William and shook my head in amazement. "Your granddaughter just organized her first international cultural exchange at age 4. My granddaughter is clearly destined for great things. Though I have to say, her diplomatic skills seem to come from her mother's side of the family. Is that your way of saying I'm better at handling difficult people than you are?" "That's my way of saying you're better at bringing out the best in people, even when they're being their worst selves." The comment reminded me of something I'd been meaning to tell him. "You know, I ran into Patricia Carlisle at the museum fundraiser last week. She mentioned that Marcus has been trying to get meetings with several of our European partners." William's expression darkened slightly. "What kind of meetings?" "Apparently, he's positioning himself as an alternative contact for American businesses wanting to expand overseas, using the Bennett name as his calling card, even though he has no official connection to our international operations. That's quite presumptuous, even for him." Over the years, Marcus had made several attempts to leverage his family connection for business advantage, usually without directly asking for help. He'd name-drop his father in client meetings, hinted insider knowledge about Bennett Holdings' plans, and generally try to benefit from an association he'd done nothing to earn. "Patricia said she set him straight about the actual structure of our organization," I continued. "But it made me think we should probably formalize some boundaries around the use of our company name." "Already handled," William said with satisfaction. "I had legal draft a cease and desist letter last month after he started calling himself a Bennett Family Enterprises consultant on his LinkedIn profile." "How did he react to that?" "About as well as you'd expect," Brittany called to apologize. I blinked in surprise. Brittany called? I thought they'd lost touch completely after the divorce. Apparently, they've maintained a friendship. She's remarried now to that nonprofit director, and they have a baby on the way. She wanted to make sure we knew that Marcus's behavior didn't represent her values. The idea of Brittany taking responsibility for her ex-husband's professional misconduct was both touching and slightly sad. Even years after leaving him, she still felt obligated to clean up his messes. That was thoughtful of her, I said. How is she doing otherwise? Very well, from what I understand. Her organization just received a major grant to expand literacy programs in underserved communities. She's apparently quite good at fundraising and program development. I'm glad she found her calling. She was always too smart to be satisfied with just being someone's wife. Speaking of callings, William said, returning to our earlier conversation, what's your initial reaction to the international position? I don't want to make any commitments without knowing how you feel about the increased responsibilities here. I looked around the office that had become my second home, thinking about the empire we'd built together and the impact we could have if we expanded our reach even further. The Bennett Foundation's education initiatives were already operating in 12 countries, and our sustainable hospitality projects were setting new industry standards for environmental responsibility. I think, I said slowly, that it's time for the next chapter of our story, which means you should accept the UNESCO position, and I'll start transitioning into the CEO role here. But I have one condition. Name it. Emma comes with us on at least 2 international trips per year. I want her to understand that business success comes with responsibility to communities around the world. William's smile was radiant. Have I mentioned recently that I married the most remarkable woman in Manhattan, only every day for the past 5 years? That evening, we hosted dinner for Emma and her grandparents, William's sister Catherine and her husband, who'd flown in from San Francisco for their annual visit. As we sat around the dining room table, Emma regaled her aunt and uncle with stories about her cultural diplomacy at school, while William and I exchanged amused glances. She gets that from you, Catherine told me with obvious affection. The ability to see situations clearly and bring people together around common ground. I think she gets it. From both of us, I replied, watching William patiently explain the difference between various pasta shapes to our daughter. We've tried to model collaboration and problem-solving in everything we do. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. She's confident without being arrogant, curious without being pushy, and clearly capable of standing up for what's right. After Emma was tucked into bed with a story about a princess who built bridges between rival kingdoms, William and I retreated to our private study to continue discussing the transition plans. There's something else I want to talk about, I said, curling up beside him on the leather sofa that had become our favorite place for important conversations. More international expansion? More personal expansion. I want to have another baby. William's eyebrows rose in surprise. Really? Emma will be starting kindergarten next year. You're about to take over a multi-billion-dollar company, and you want to add sleepless nights and diaper changes to the mix. I want to add siblings and family chaos, and the kind of rich, complicated life that comes from building something bigger than just professional success. He was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. It would certainly make international travel more complicated. It would make everything more complicated. And more wonderful. You realize that if I'm traveling extensively for UNESCO, and you're running the company while managing 2 children, we'll need to be incredibly strategic about work-life balance. We'll figure it out. We always do. William pulled me closer, his hands settling on my stomach as if he could already imagine another child growing there. In that case, he said softly, I think expanding our family sounds like the perfect next adventure. As we sat together planning our future, I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago. Angry, heartbroken, determined to prove her worth through revenge against a man who'd never deserved her in the first place. That woman could never have imagined the life I was living now, the partnership I'd found, the family we were building together. The revenge plot had worked better than I'd ever dreamed, but not in the way I'd originally planned. Instead of destroying Marcus, I'd simply become so successful and fulfilled that his opinion of me had become completely irrelevant. And instead of using William to hurt his son, I'd discovered what it meant to be truly loved and valued by someone who saw my ambitions as assets rather than threats. The perfect revenge, it turned out, wasn't about making your enemies suffer. It was about building something so beautiful with your life that their approval became unnecessary and their criticism became meaningless. And as William and I began planning our expanding family and our growing global impact, I realized that the best part of the whole story was that it was far from over. We were just getting started. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.